Hello everyone, welcome back. I am Kris. This is Fat Electrician. This is World War II vets versus corrupt cops, the Battle of Athens, Tennessee. I was told about this video and I was told I would thoroughly enjoy it. So we're going to break it down into two parts. Before we get started, you can click that, click on the subscribe, and there's a thanks button there. You can click on that, donate to the channel. All right, this will be two over 19-minute videos.
Ah, yes, the only successful armed rebellion in U.S. history. Today we're talking about the Battle of Athens, aka the Battle of the Ballads, aka the War of McMinn County, whatever you want to call it. The fact of the matter is that in 1945 and 1946, hundreds of Americans returned home to McMinn County, Tennessee after winning World War II. Upon their return, they would discover that their local government had been corrupted. They were engaging in rigging elections, the sheriff's department was mercilessly beating innocent civilians and extorting hundreds of thousands of dollars from taxpayers, and they decided to do something about it. This story has achieved legendary status, with many people hearing and knowing about it in passing, but very few people understand how epic this story actually is. But you're gonna learn today, right after a word from our sponsor. This video is brought to you by Sundays for Dogs. Mechanics and shit will just be bad. Technical. All right, sit down, shut up. This is complicated, so pay attention. All right, our story begins in 1910 when a man by the name of Edward Crump becomes the mayor of Memphis, Tennessee. Upon becoming mayor, he sets out to build a political machine. The way he does this is he's willing to look the other way for illegal gambling and alcohol operations as long as they're willing to pay a large protection fee to Mayor Crump. He then uses that money to influence other elections, effectively having all the other politicians and judges and elected officials in his back pocket. Anybody that dares to go against him is absolutely crushed. If you're a local businessman and you don't agree with him and you're not willing to play by his rules, guess what? You're gonna have no parking signs in front of your entire store. If that's not enough, on one occasion, he actually had the police department stand outside somebody's store and search every customer when they went in and when they left. And if that wasn't enough, he would have city inspectors go in and find out that, oh, your business isn't up to code, we're gonna have to shut you down. And more often,
This seems like complete legal, logical things to do. I don't understand what the problem is.
often than not, there was no legal recourse because he owned the judges too. Over the course of decades, this would expand throughout the entire city of Memphis and then the entire Shelby County area, the most populated county in Tennessee, and then it would spread throughout the entire state of Tennessee. By the late 1920s, Crump was literally known as Boss Crump, the King of Memphis.
What, you some type of pimp?
I mean, look at him. He even looks like a 1930s silent movie villain. Anyways, by the 1930s, Crump has essentially the entire state of Tennessee in his back pocket. Absolutely everybody. Politicians, sheriffs, elected officials, judges, all of it. And in 1936, he backs a man by the name of Paul Cantrell to be the sheriff of McMinn County. Now, Paul Cantrell wins by a landslide, A, because he's backed by Crump, but B, he also runs on a really good platform that he was gonna put an end to fee grabbing. Now, at this point in time, the sheriff's department wasn't
What is fee grabbing?
platform that he was going to put an end to fee grabbing. Now, at this point in time, the sheriff's department wasn't paid by taxpayer dollars. They were almost exclusively paid for by the fines that they collected. Now, that sounds crazy to
If I wouldn't have paused it, I would have been told.
us today because it is crazy for obvious reasons. You are now putting a financial incentive to law enforcement to arrest and fine as many people as possible. And in a lot of places, that's exactly what happened. So
I mean, that's how we feel like happens today. They get enough busts, stupid pulling people over for small things that seem inconsequential. I'm sure some people will say, well, you should have had a better a taillight fixed or something like this. Okay, I get it. A headlight fixed. Okay, whatever. But some of the things you get pulled over and then they just, instead of one thing, they'll give you like 4 different things. And all of a sudden, next thing you know, your local small town sheriff's department has a tank that they apparently needed because now they've got it in their budget.
Cantrell came along and he was like, I'm going to put an end to that because it's obviously ridiculous, which is a good thing to want to put an end to. He said, you know what? I'm going to take a $5,000 a year annual salary and that's going to be it. And I'm only going to fine and charge people and arrest people when they deserve it. And I'm not going to do it to make more money. That's a great platform and a just cause. So he wins. And then after winning, he decides, I'm not going to do that.
I lied.
So the McMinn County government steps in and is like, no, you ran on that platform. We're going to go ahead and make it a law that you're going to take this $5,000 a year salary, just like you said you would, and that's going to be that. So Cantrell ends up filing a lawsuit suing the county, and he wins because he's backed by Crump. So now he's allowed to keep fee grabbing, and he takes it to an absolute extreme. Anybody that was arrested for anything was charged a minimum of $16, and that was the fee for getting arrested, getting driven to court, being booked, going through the whole process. $6 went to the arresting officer, and the other 10 went into the sheriff's department and the court system. To put it into perspective, $16 at this point the other 10 went into the sheriff's department and the court system. To put it into perspective, $16 at this point in time is about $300 today.
Okay. Wow. $16, $263.77. Man, can you imagine just getting whatever and instantly it's $263 fine? It's just crazy. In the place where I live, they will say you get pulled over for a tail light. You don't get a ticket. You get a court summons. So you have to go to court to show that you're which is a bit corrupt anyways. Go to court to show that you've got your taillight fixed, and they'll throw out the $75 ticket. And instead, you get $150 in court costs because you had to go to court for it. It's bullshit.
And they were arresting anyone for anything they felt like, including drunkenness. They would literally just walk somewhere and be like, hey, you look drunk, you're under arrest. This was the 1930s. There's no breathalyzer. There's no field sobriety test. Literally, the deputy says, I think you're drunk. Guess what? You're fucking drunk.
Sounds a lot like, I smell an odor in your car. Do you? It smells like you've been smoking in here. This car's never had anyone smoke in there at all. So what are you talking about?
Give me $300. In the first 4 years he was sheriff, Cantrell paid himself $56,000, which is over $1 million in today's money. He also gave himself jobs that didn't exist. He was the superintendent of the county shed, earning him $2,500 a year. There was no county shed for him to be the superintendent of, but guess what? He's collecting the money. And anybody that dared to go against him would get brutally beaten, if not killed, by his deputies, and they never got in trouble because the judges were part of the good old boy system. One of the primary judges involved in this was Judge Sue Hicks. And to be fair, Sue Hicks has almost nothing to do with the rest of the story, so why am I bringing him up in the first place? Well, because he's actually the inspiration for the legendary Johnny Cash song, A Boy Named Sue, and I thought that was interesting.
I said, my name is Sue. How do you do? Are you gonna die?
Anyways, moving on. Now, this goes on for years. The entire town's mad about it. Everybody's pissed off, but there's nothing anybody can do. There's no legal recourse, and if they try to stand up to them, they're just gonna get the shit kicked out of them by the deputies, so everybody just kind of lives with it. But hey, the silver lining, we live in a democracy. A couple years from now, we're just gonna have another election, and we'll vote this guy out, we'll get a new sheriff, and hopefully that'll be a good guy. Well, next election rolls around, and they rigged the entire thing. Now, at this point in time in Tennessee, they had a poll tax. Basically, you had to pay money if you wanted to exercise your right to vote, which sounds crazy to us today, but that's how it worked back then. And it also wasn't that big of a deal at this point in time because usually the Democrat and Republican parties were willing to pay the poll taxes for the voters to show up and vote. So basically the party was fronting the bill for people to come in and vote. But the problem was that you had to go pay your poll tax prior to the day of voting. So you had to go pay your poll tax and then have the valid receipt showing that you paid your poll tax and turn that in when you went to vote. But you had to pay that poll tax like months in advance. So what they would do is they would never publish or put out to the masses when the deadline to pay your poll tax was, unless you were in the know and they knew how you were going to be voting. Then they would let you know, hey, you got to buy your poll tax by this time. So they were essentially disenfranchising anybody that wasn't on their side. On top of that, dead people voted. People that didn't exist voted. The deputies got caught telling elderly people that if they didn't, quote, vote the right way, that their pensions would be held up. They also claimed that there was 1,500 absentee votes, which was a staggering number considering considering the neighboring county, Knox County, that had 6 times the population, had never reported more than 600 absentee ballots. In addition to that, nobody was allowed to observe or poll watch, and if they tried, they would get the shit kicked out of them by the deputies, and then they'd get arrested. So Cantrell...
Knox County, Tennessee, nearby. I think that Knox County is... I don't know for sure. I was thinking Knoxville. Don't know. Anyways, I don't know if it's in Knox County, but Knoxville is where... Wow. Why can I not think of the name? Johnson. Anyways, the president after Lincoln was assassinated, or after Lincoln was assassinated, Johnson took over. Andrew Johnson. There you go. Yeah, he is from Knoxville, so that popped into my head. Completely different.
Obviously wins the next election because he rigged the entire thing. The people of McMinn County know that this is absolute bullshit. They're writing their state and federal politicians. The Department of Justice ends up launching an investigation in 1940. Nothing ever comes of it because Crump has connections in the federal government too. 1941 rolls around, Japan fucks around with America's boats, America enters World War II, and all the young men go off to war. Then in 1942, Cantrell decides his sheriff gig is too small for him. He's gonna run for Tennessee State Senate, and he's gonna appoint his right-hand man, Pat Mansfeld, to be the sheriff. Now, Cantrell is running against an incumbent politician, and this guy knows the ropes. He knows that Crump owns the entire state of Tennessee, and he knows that he's gonna be backing Cantrell, so he pretty much immediately just drops out of the race, and Cantrell runs unopposed. The incumbent senator that dropped out of the race, a man by the name of Robert Lindsay, when asked why he didn't put up a fight, said, and I quote, "I have been elected to state senate from McMahon, Bradley, Roane, and Anderson counties for 3 terms, each time by fair and honest methods. I might be elected again, but if I do so, it would be necessary for my friends in Bradley, Roane, and Anderson to resort to the same kinds of methods my opposition has convinced me it will use in McMahon. I do not intend to use such methods." Translation, I can't win unless I cheat, and I'm not gonna cheat. So Cantrell wins, becomes a state senator. From here, he goes about making it even easier to cheat in elections. What he does in McMinn County is he cuts it from 23 precincts, 23 voting locations throughout the county, down to 12, making it so people have to travel up to 20 miles to go vote. Bear in mind, this is the 1940s in rural Tennessee. People don't have cars, okay? People are walking to voting locations. They're riding fucking horses, okay? Would you travel 20 miles on horseback or walk 20 miles to go vote in a sheriff's election? Probably not, especially if you had to pay money and you didn't know when you had to pay the money and you don't have the fucking receipt.
If I ain't getting down there, it ain't worth it.
In addition to that, now that he's cut it down to 12 precincts instead of 23, now he can have more armed thugs there to intimidate people as they go to vote to make sure they're voting the right way. From here, 1942 election rolls around. They rig the entire thing. Pat Mansfield wins. DOJ investigates, comes up with nothing. 2 years later, same exact thing, 1944. They rig the election. DOJ investigates. Nothing gets done. September 25th, 1944.
All right, sorry.
A Navy Seabee by the name of Earl Ford comes back home to McMinn County. He's in his Navy uniform still, just got home from the war, and he decides he's gonna go out to the bar and have a good time in his military uniform. Now, to a normal person like you and me in 1944, seeing somebody in their Navy uniform coming home to the bar, you would probably think in your head, oh, it's a war hero coming home from the war. That's what a normal, sane, decent person would think. But to the deputies of McMinn County, all they saw was dollar signs because they know that he probably has a ton of money because he's been racking up and saving the entire time he was in military service, and they're gonna arrest him and fine the shit out of him so they can make money. Upon leaving the bar, several deputies decide that they are going to engage Earl by hitting him in the back of the head with a club, not like, hey sir, why don't you come here so we can talk, not hey, I think you're drunk in public. No words were exchanged, they just hit him in the head. Obviously, he's dazed, doesn't know what's going on. He turns around and tries to put up a fight and, I don't know, maybe defend himself like any normal person would, not exactly resisting arrest when they open up by attacking you, at which point they draw a gun, shoot him in the chest, and kill him. Obviously, this upsets a lot of people in town that they just killed a young man coming home from the war, at which point the deputies claimed that he pulled a knife on them and tried to stab him and they were forced to shoot him. None of the witnesses that were there corroborated that. He was in a Navy uniform that didn't have pockets, so they don't know where he would be able to conceal a knife. And when they asked where the knife was after the fact, after shooting him in the chest, somehow the knife that he would have had in his hand trying to stab the police officer allegedly wound up behind him and underneath his dead body. And of course,
Yeah, you get shot holding a knife, you get that death grip, so it would have stayed in his hand.
the deputies get away with it. The deputy that shot him didn't even get fired or reprimanded because he's one of the boys of the political system, and that's the way this shit works.
We make our own luck.
1945 rolls around. World War II comes to a close. All of the young men from McMinn County that went off and fought all end up coming home. And the deputies just see more and more dollar signs, right? Anytime you see a young man between like 18 to 25, that guy served in the military, probably has a bunch of money. When World War II veterans left the service, they got mustering out pay, one big lump sum, so they know that they can just arrest these guys and find the shit out of them and make a ton of money. One of the first veterans to have a run-in with the deputies is Sergeant Bill White from the United States Marine Corps. This man fought on Guadalcanal and Tarawa, and then after that went on to become a jungle warfare instructor stateside. His dad sends him over to the rationing board because it's World War II, just got over, they still have all these rationing committees. They're rationing rubber, sugar, gasoline, all kinds of things that people need. You have to have ration stamps and everybody's only allowed to get so much. So dad sends his son Bill down to the rationing board to get 5 gallons of gas. Rationing board is like, no. And Bill's like, all right. So he goes to his buddy who had been in town longer and is like, hey, the rationing board basically just told me to fuck off when I wanted to get some gas. What's the deal? And he goes, oh, there's a deputy at the rationing board. You need to go pay him off and then he'll wave you through and the rationing board will give you whatever you want. So Bill goes over to the deputy, pays him $5. Deputy waves it off. He gets his 5 gallons of gas and he leaves. And Bill watches the deputy pocket the money. Bill has no idea what the fuck just happened. He's thrown off. So he goes home and tells his dad, who was a Cav scout in World War I, this story. And his dad's like, yeah, that's just how it is here now. And his dad proceeds to tell him this story about how he was on lunch break from work and he had a bottle of milk that he was drinking out of his lunch pail. And the deputy showed up, sniffed his milk and said there was alcohol in it and arrested him for being drunk and fined him $16, which was almost a week's pay for him. So Bill's pretty pissed off, obviously. And within a matter of months, pretty much every veteran that had returned home from the war was equally as pissed off.
Okay, sorry. I had to do a quick check. So I took that $263.77, which was the $16, and divided that by 3. So it's not exactly, I just took basically 5, 10, 15, even though it's 16. But it's about, for that rationing board, it cost him about, in today's money, about $87.92 for him to be able to get gas. So that seems a lot, because I would only need like $25 worth of gas.
Because they were all being targeted by the sheriff's department because they knew that they had money. The deputies got so bold that they would go into bars, not wait outside for them to stagger out drunk. They would just go into bars and start arresting people for being drunk inside of a bar. On multiple occasions, they would walk into a bar if there was like a dance or a big event and just arrest absolutely everybody there. Not because they were doing anything wrong, just because they wanted to get the money. So the veterans understandably started to get pretty pissed off and they would just start drinking in private. They'd have their own private parties that the deputies didn't know about so they could hang out with their friends in peace and not get arrested all the time. So all the veterans obviously wound up becoming really close friends. They all got together, they'd drink in private, they'd swap war stories. There's a guy by the name of John Fry who said he became the most powerful man in France for a couple weeks when his unit overtook a cognac distillery and he had all the liquor in France. So he was like, you know, the most powerful guy around, wheeling and dealing with all of his booze. Carl Anderson told the story.
That's funny.
Story about how a German officer threatened to cut his finger off when he refused to give him his wedding ring. Tom Dooley would always bring his pet monkey that he acquired while he was overseas and somehow smuggled back home to Tennessee. Like, it was just a group of crazy, incredible men that had awesome stories that wound up becoming friends and bonded over the fact that they were all being discriminated against for their service. And as time went on, they went from drinking and discussing war stories to talking about the current political climate and how to fix it. And as they talked to townspeople, they started to realize, oh, they're literally rigging the elections. They rigged 1942, 1944, and they're probably going to rig this next one in 1946. We need to do something. So they went to the only political opposition that the Cantel Mafia had, a man by the name of Otto Kennedy, a local businessman that owned the tire shop in town, and he agreed to help him, and his tire shop became their new hangout. Leading up to the 1946 election, this group of veterans put out an ad in the paper reaching out to more veterans, basically saying if you were a veteran, and I quote, regardless of color or creed, if interested in cleaning up McMinn County and the return of good, clean, honest, and efficient government, don't fail to attend this event. Hundreds of veterans winded up showing up to this event, and they essentially pitched the idea to this crowd of veterans like, hey, look, regardless of whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or the color of your skin, we can all agree that this is fucked up and we need to restore order. We should band together and form a GI ticket, and we will run against Cantel and all of his men and replace all of them. And they all agreed, and they picked their candidates. Sergeant Henry Knox, who had served 40 months overseas, agreed that he would run for sheriff. Major Frank Carmichael volunteered to run as treasurer. Captain Bill Hamby was going to be the clerk of the court, and Captain Charlie Pickle was going to be the register of deeds. They had just selected the GI cleanup ticket, and their slogan was going to be, your vote will be counted as cast. And they chose that as their slogan because they knew they didn't need to win over the voters. Those voters would vote for anybody that wasn't part of this corrupt political machine, and the real struggle was going to be convincing the voters to show up and vote, because by this point in time, over the course of the last decade, they'd been so demoralized into knowing that no matter what happens, they're going to rig the election, they're going to take my money. If I show up, I'm just going to get harassed by armed gunmen and arrested, and then I'm going to have a target on my back. I'm just not even going to go vote. That was a real...
And that's where you start to have, that's where bad things happen. I've said this, it's something that I heard, and it is you can, it's easier to kill the good inside of you than to fight the evil around you, because everyone is so convinced that, well, this is wrong. Don't worry. It's going to be corrected. Somebody will fix this. Somebody's going to step in of higher authority, somebody from the government or somebody from the state is going to see all this and they're going to step in. No, they won't. No, they won't. You have to do something. And the longer you allow it to happen, the more that the bad will have other bad people working for them, and eventually it's going to seem insurmountable. But you allowed it. You allowed them to turn a mole into a mountain, a molehill into a mountain.
Struggle. That was a hurdle they needed to overcome, was convincing the populace of McMinn County that this time democracy was going to work. They were not going to let them rig this election. These young men went across the world and fought for democracy and won, and now they came back home. They're going to fight for it again, and they're going to win again. And the veterans went absolutely ham trying to prove this to every single person in McMinn County. They literally went to every single door in the entire county and had personal conversations with every single person. Almost every person in McMinn County had personally met at least one member on the GI ticket and spoke to them in person. Felix had acquired a Piper Cub airplane somehow, and they were literally crop dusting pamphlets over the town for the GI ticket. They had trucks rigged up with loudspeakers, and they would drive around town telling everybody, show up, vote, your vote is going to count this time. And after a while, it started to work. People started to believe that their vote was actually going to count this time, so they went, they paid the poll tax, they got their receipt, and what the deputies did in retaliation was they would go out and they would arrest veterans, and when they arrested them, if they had their poll tax receipt on them, they would confiscate it and not give it back so they couldn't vote. So they started reaching out to the bigger government. They wrote to the governor, they wrote to the attorney general, they wrote to Washington, D.C. One person even went as far as to tell the attorney general, if there's bloodshed this year, it's on your hands. And nobody did anything. As the election got closer and closer, there was really no campaigning from the machine side. They just
Okay, so earlier when I said everyone thinks that somebody else will step in, and then you get to those people, and those people do nothing, they're also a part of the problem. Those people can be voted out. Some of those people. They can be voted out. But yeah, it's just a bigger problem. But you can't be discouraged about it. You got to just keep understanding what's happening and start trying to bring spotlights to the attention of how bad it is.
The amount of harassment the deputies were doling out to veterans and anybody they thought might be friendly to those veterans. That's all they did. They were just in it to make more money. Why did they need to campaign? They were going to rig the election. They knew they were going to win. But they were starting to get a little bit nervous. So Paul Cantrell would step down from Senate and he was going to come back to McMinn County and he was going to run for sheriff this year. And his right-hand man, Mansfield, was going to take his spot in the Senate. And then election day came, August 1st, 1946. And you got to realize it's just a small sheriff's department. They've only got like 30 deputies. There's hundreds of veterans. The veterans guaranteed that everybody would be safe going to the polls. And these armed thugs aren't going to be able to outmuscle the veterans. There's just not enough of them. And then a literal caravan of cars came into McMinn County and Athens, Tennessee. Cantrell had brought in over 250 armed men, any men that he could find, other deputies from other counties, police departments, prison guards. They even deputized some prisoners, a lot of which were literally violent criminals. At this point, the veterans know shit's about to hit the fan because Cantrell now has 250 armed men manning the 12 precincts. They are going to intimidate absolutely everybody. So the GIs got together and issued a statement over the radio to the people of McMinn County. Quote, "Go to your precincts, vote, and stick around all day to hear who wins. This is not old Germany. Hitler is not telling you how to vote. Don't be bothered by any scare campaign. Cantrell's henchmen may try. You will be safe at the polls, and your vote will be counted as cast." The polling locations open up at 9 a.m. and in Athens, Tennessee, the county seat where most of the voting is going to be taking place, there's 3 voting locations: the Dixie Cafe, the Waterworks, and the courthouse. And at every single location, there is hundreds of people standing outside at 9 a.m. waiting to vote. Lines literally wrapping around the block. This is going to be a record-breaking election. And as soon as the polls open, shit hits the fan immediately.
It's going to be a record-breaking election. That should tell you exactly why all those cops were there, because they know exactly that they're going to lose. I went back to this because I'm going to go ahead and end it here, and we will be back with part 2. Yeah, this sounds like it's not gonna be pretty. And I've heard a little bit about it. I was told to do the video, so I understand a little bit of what happens. So we'll see. Anyways, until part 2, have a good day, have a good night.